One of the difficulties I've had with this tenon jig is that I cut a tenon on this piece of wood here, and my tenon isn't quite right because if we take a look at it here, this area right here is narrower than back here. It's not aligned right. Very difficult to see it. This is probably the best shot I'm going to get, but this area right here is narrower than out here. So I went and checked everything, and this square is very old, but it is square, and I got it in this corner here, and it shows that this piece right here that is not square. So I'm going to have to use my table saw sled and square it up. One of the things I wanted to check on this table saw, and all table saws are only a little bit different. This one here, I can adjust the table. I've got it pretty close, and I think I have it right on the money as far as the table in relation to the blade. And that's what I'm checking right here. I have the table saw blade clear up about as far as it'll go, and what I'm doing here is checking the teeth to make sure that they are running parallel to the miter slot. So right here I've got about 5 inches and 1/16. Alright, now we go to the front of it. And it's about 1 inch and 1/16. So I know that that's not the problem. It's with the jig in some way. Well, I had said earlier that I was going to use my table saw sled. This is my table saw sled right here. And I'm not going to use it. The way I made this, and the reason why I made it in this way, was that quite a few years ago I saw how to make one on Norm Abrams' show, and New Yankee Workshop. No, I guess it was This Old House. And so I made that table saw sled. I'm going to redo that because it's not cutting square. So I decided to use my miter saw jig right here. Now one thing I checked was to see whether this is straight, and it is. I straightened this on my joiner. Another thing I want to check is whether this is square to my bar, to this bar right here. It's kind of rainy today and pretty cold, that's why I'm out here. It's kind of cold, but alright, it's way off. It's not square to the bar. So it's straight and everything, and then we're going to have to come over here, and so there's going to be some camera movement, but we're going to have to come over here to the table saw. As there's something else that I want to check here. Alright, now we're at the front of the table saw. I'm going to check to see if this board here is parallel to the edge, this front edge here, and it's pretty good. One thing they have on these miter gauges is they have a nice scale on the front here, and like I say, my saw is a Sears, and it's in good shape still. But you can change the angle on it. I'm going to tell you something about table saws. If you're buying one, if you're going to get an aluminum table for your table saw, it's going to move with humidity and so forth, and with the temperature change and barometric pressure and things like that. But one of the most stable materials that you're going to find is cast iron, and it's extremely stable, very expensive in large amounts, but that's why they use it for a lot of machine shop tools, machine shop machines. So this one here, I've checked it several different times, and it's very consistent. It's also got a couple of defects in it. There's a dip right in here because of the milling machine that machined this top. Well, I've got this miter gauge where I want it. So now I'm going to take off a little bit of this part here. On some of these TV shows, they make a big deal about the saw guard being removed. It is actually safer to have it removed because the saw guard actually hides the blade. But if you disagree with that, that's up to you. Because it's your safety, it's not mine, and so take precautions on your table saw because it's your fingers and toes, and well, I guess you don't want your toes up there, but they're your fingers and hands and everything. So, well, I took a little bit off here, and now we're going to check it. This is a pretty old square Stanley. That side is not parallel, or 90 degrees I should say. And this one is pretty close. I guess it's not perfect either. And one of the things I want to check here is to see whether this runner here is 90 degrees to the edge. This is the end that I just cut. Yeah, put it up to the light to check it. Now that's no good, so we're going to have to do some adjustment here. Well, I decided to not use my table saw because the problem with a table saw is that the top is so slick that when you're pushing a part through it, it tends to slip. So I decided to come over here to my Ryobi table saw, radial saw, and use that. So I made a cut here, and this is really nice and square. And then I made sure that it was square to this slot here, because I have a nice slot there. The slot is extremely straight. Well, I thought it was straight. I guess it's not. But I did use my radial saw. My radial saw turns at about 22,000 RPM, so it's really a fast one. But one thing I checked here was to see whether this runner was 90 degrees to this surface right here, and it is. So we're going to go with that. And we'll see what we're going to do about this slot, because I don't believe it's 90 degrees to the edge here. That's really close.